You have something to say. You feel it forming in your mind, but right before you speak, you pause. Not because you don't know what to say, but because you're not sure how it will be understood. So you wait for the right moment, the right tone, the right signal. And most of the time, that moment never comes. Problem deep dive. It doesn't look obvious from the outside. People might think you're just quiet, reserved. But inside, it's not silence, it's activity. You're tracking the conversation, reading reactions, trying to understand the emotional tone. You're asking questions like, would this make sense if I say it? Will they get what I actually mean? Or will it come out wrong? So instead of speaking freely, you edit, refine, delay. And sometimes you say nothing at all. Not because you don't want to connect, but because you want to be understood accurately. But here's what happens next. The conversation moves on. The moment passes, and now you're left with a quiet frustration. You feel unseen, unheard, even though you were there the whole time. And over time, this creates a pattern. You start believing, I'm just not good at conversations, or I'm not the kind of person who speaks up. But that's not entirely true, because when you're with the right person, someone who already understands you, you're different, more open, more expressive, more natural. So the question becomes, why do you need to feel understood before you express yourself? Reframe. You're not shy. You're cautious about misinterpretation. Your brain isn't trying to avoid people. It's trying to avoid being misunderstood. Because being misunderstood doesn't just feel uncomfortable, it feels destabilizing, like something about you has been represented incorrectly. So your brain creates a rule, only express when it's safe. But here's the problem. That safety depends on something you can't fully control, how someone else will interpret you. So you wait for clarity, for alignment, for a signal that says they'll get it. But that signal rarely comes first, which means your expression gets delayed and connection never fully begins. But why does your brain treat misunderstanding as something to avoid? Psychological mechanism. To understand this, you need to look at how the brain processes social meaning. When you communicate, you're not just sending words, you're sending internal experiences, thoughts, intentions, emotions, and your brain wants those experiences to be received accurately. This involves something called mentalizing, your ability to model other people's minds. It's linked to areas like the medial prefrontal cortex and temporoparietal junction. These systems try to predict how will they interpret what I say. But here's where it gets complex. Your brain doesn't just simulate one outcome, it simulates multiple. Some positive, some neutral, some negative. And because the brain is biased toward caution, it gives more weight to the negative ones. This is called negativity bias. So even if there's a small chance of being misunderstood, your brain treats it as significant. Now combine this with another process, inhibitory control. Your prefrontal cortex can suppress actions when it detects risk. So when your brain predicts possible misinterpretation, it doesn't just notice it, it slows you down, holds you back. Here's the mental model. Imagine you're about to send a message, but before it leaves, your brain runs it through multiple filters: clarity, tone, interpretation. If any of those feel uncertain, the message gets delayed, not canceled, just paused. And if the moment passes, it never gets sent. That's why you feel stuck, because your brain is waiting for certainty in a system that doesn't offer it. So how do you express yourself when understanding can't be guaranteed? Practical framework. You don't need perfect understanding. You need enough safety to begin. 1. Lower the accuracy requirement. Right now, you're aiming to be understood perfectly. What to do? Allow your message to be good enough, not exact. Why it works: this reduces cognitive load and lowers inhibitory control. Your brain becomes more willing to act. Real-life example: instead of waiting for the perfect phrasing, you say a simpler version, even if it's not complete. 2. Treat conversation as a process, not a delivery. You're trying to get it right in one attempt, but communication is iterative. What to do: see conversations as something you refine through back and forth. Why it works: this reduces pressure on initial expression and allows meaning to evolve over time. Real-life example: you say something slightly unclear. The other person responds, you adjust, and clarity builds gradually. 3. Tolerate small misunderstandings. Not every misinterpretation needs correction. What to do: let minor misunderstandings exist without immediately fixing them. Why it works: this desensitizes your brain to perceived social errors, reducing avoidance over time. Real-life example: someone slightly misreads your tone. Instead of correcting instantly, you let the conversation continue, and it stabilizes on its own. 4. Shift from being understood to being expressed. Your focus is on the outcome, but you control the action. What to do: prioritize expressing your thought, not controlling how it's received. Why it works: this reduces performance pressure and increases behavioral activation. Real-life example: you share your perspective without over-monitoring how it lands, and that alone creates presence. 5. Practice speaking earlier, not perfectly. Timing matters more than precision. What to do: speak earlier in the conversation, before overthinking builds. Why it works: this interrupts the prediction loop before inhibitory control strengthens. Real-life example: instead of waiting, you say your thought when it first appears, even briefly. Integration. At its core, this isn't about silence, it's about sequencing. You've been trying to reverse the order. You want to be understood before you express, but communication doesn't work that way. Understanding comes after expression, not before. So when you wait for clarity first, you delay the very thing that creates it, and your brain stays stuck in prediction instead of experience. But once you shift that order, something changes. You speak first, then refine, then connect. Quiet, empowering close. You were never meant to be perfectly understood before you speak. You were meant to discover understanding through expression, through small attempts, through imperfect moments, because connection doesn't begin with certainty. It begins with movement, with a sentence that isn't perfect, with a thought that isn't fully formed. And when you allow that, something opens, not all at once, but gradually. You stop waiting for the perfect moment to be understood and start creating moments where understanding can happen. Because in the end, it's not that you had nothing to say, it's that you were waiting for permission that never comes. And maybe you don't need that permission anymore.